this be a lesson to you guys. Never accidentally delete your footage, because then you'll have to redo it. What's up everyone, it is Joshua here, Future Filmmaker Reviews with Joshua. I talk movies, TV, music, and anime, giving you guys my revisited movie review for Transformers: The Revenge of the Fallen. This is the second time I had to do this, but hopefully I can condense it a little bit. This was directed once again by Michael Bay, written by Ehren Kruger, Roberto Orci, and Alex Kurtzman, based on the Transformers of the same name. It stars Shia LaBeouf, Megan Fox, Josh Duhamel, Tyrese Gibson, John Turturro, Kevin Dunn, Julie White, Isabel Lucas, Peter Cullen, Tony Todd, and Hugo Weaving. And this has some stuff to unpack in this. So, 2 years after the events of the first movie, Sam and his Autobot friends faces a new battle, mainly Sam, with college. Meanwhile, Optimus Prime and the Autobots are working with a secret military organization and trying to make a home for themselves on Earth. When the ancient Decepticon, known as the Fallen, attempts to wreak havoc, Sam and his girlfriend Michaela must figure out the history of the Transformers on Earth and find a way to defeat the Fallen once and for all, while also having to deal with the Fallen wanting to claim the sun and Sam being a fugitive on the run. This is going to be a pretty interesting review. Now, this movie was plagued with production problems when this movie was coming out. It is well documented that the writers' strike that this movie was on, when they were trying to make this movie, definitely destroyed this movie. And with the Directors Guild and the Writers Guild, they managed to film this movie on time and get this movie done with pre-visualization in the script, because at the time, the screenwriters couldn't write anything. They had to work with what they got. And they were able to film this movie, and this was also not only the last movie to be released by DreamWorks, but this is also the last movie to feature Megan Fox in the lead role as Michaela, as there was some conflicts on set of this movie. I remember this movie coming out, I was very excited to see a sequel to Transformers because the first one was so awesome. And at the time, I thought this was the greatest thing ever.
Oh my god!
The hell, man?
Oh my god!
Curses!
Are you suicidal?
I'm not kidding you. And if you're wondering why I have this movie on Blu-ray and DVD, especially with the single disc, is because I don't hate this movie. Trust me, I know plenty of people who is going to leave comments and they're going to express to me how much they hate this movie. Even Transformers fans hate this movie. Even Michael Bay fans hate it. And I completely get it. Trust me. I see the problems with this movie. But there are some things in this movie I actually do like when it comes to this movie. So, when I first saw this, I remember loving this. I thought it was great. I thought it was better than the original. You know, I was a kid at the time, and so this movie I thought was the greatest thing ever. And when the new installment comes out, that Phantom Menacing syndrome. But with every subsequent rewatch, and especially last month to prepare for this review, this movie has a ton of problems. But before I go into some of the problems, I do have a few things of trivia I found out. John Turturro was allowed to climb the pyramids during filming in Egypt. At one point, simply broke down crying, which I knew that must have been exciting to do. I would be scared to climb those pyramids. Also, there is a poster of Bad Boys 2 in Sam's bedroom, which is actually pretty cool. Michael Bay, once again, poking himself in the wrong in his own movie. Also, originally the character of Alice was supposed to be played by Brie Larson, which, could you imagine that? Brie Larson in a movie like this? That would have been interesting. But then again, she wouldn't be getting an Academy Award winner. The filming of this movie started the day this movie won the MTV Movie Award for Best Movie. So that's actually kind of ambitious to do, but yeah. Mitchell Taylor and Anthony Anderson did not come back for this. So, like I said in my review of the first movie, kind of lost. Enough chit chat. Let's go into the things I like about Revenge of the Fallen, because as flawed as this movie is, this is still one of my guilty pleasures. One, I will say that I do think, once again, despite everything that went on making this movie, despite all the tumultuous production troubles that went on, I think Michael Bay did the best he could in trying to make this movie the best that it could be. You can definitely tell that he was not in the right place at the right time. Even he and Shia LaBeouf has dismissed this movie, saying this movie was crap and they wanted to do better. But I feel like that they did try the best they could to make something decent out of this. Again, does the direction have issues at times? Yes. But for the most part, I will say that the movie, it did try to make an effort. And the direction is once again very good in the movie. There is some good Transformers action in this movie, especially the scene with Megatron and Optimus Prime in the forest. I remember seeing that in the trailers as a kid, and I always thought the Optimus Prime and Megatron fight in the forest was a good part of the movie, except one issue, which I'll get to. I think that's a very cool fight. It kind of shows how strong Optimus can be, but it also shows that Megatron is not screwing around this time around. I will also say the scene in Shanghai is also a lot of fun to watch. I do think the opening in Shanghai is pretty cool. Getting the introduction of some new Autobots like the RC twins and the Mud Flap and Skidge, which I have some things to say about them. Sideswipe, a lot more Autobots in this movie this time around. And I will say the Autobots and Decepticons numbers just gets tackled up. So I will say that the action in this movie is still competent for what they get. Cinematography wise, by Ben Saracen, is a really good cinematography work, despite some of the camera work being a little bit from the human's perspective, which that is kind of the thing you have to take or leave when it comes to the first couple of movies in this franchise. The mixing and the visual effects, especially on the Autobots and Decepticons, for the $200 million budget, both old and new, looks really freaking good in this movie. All of the Autobots look really good, especially Devastator, which Devastator was so massive that at one time it actually crashed a computer.
Oh man, he's a deep shit.
That's unbelievable. Mixing and the sound design and the visual effects here are very well done. And this was the first movie to use the IMAX aspect ratio, which, unlike Transformers The Last Night, which I hate that movie, but I own it, it does, the aspect ratio of the IMAX camera doesn't change more than once. But the action in this movie is still competent. They still try to make it at least plausible. And the final battle of Egypt this was before people were exhausted of deserts, but back then it was cool. I still find it to be entertaining. Now deserts are cool again because of Dune, so thank you, Denis Villeneuve.
Relax, girl.
Performances overall here are mostly competent. The returning actors, Shia LaBeouf, Megan Fox, they do good as Sam and Michaela once again. Josh Duhamel and Tyrese Gibson does good as well, again, as Captain Lennox and Sergeant Ebbs. They do good what they're given. The parents in this movie are good for the most part. Kevin Dunn and Julie White is Ron and Judy. They do fine for the most part, but there are quite a couple issues when it comes to them. You also have Glenn Morshower back here as General Morshower, the supervisor of Nest. The Autobots here are still very good here. Peter Cullen's Optimus Prime is still great. Bumblebee is still Bumblebee. Hugo Weaving is more intense as Megatron. He went full force. Even when the dialogue at times is not very good, I think his presence as Megatron is good. And it would have been nice if they focused on someone other than Megatron in the second movie, but I understand you have to have Megatron in this movie here. You also have Jetfire here by Mark Ryan. In here, I think he's good. You also got Ironhide and Ratchet and Starscream and Soundwave. And you have also say I don't mind the character of Tony Todd as the Fallen. There's just one little issue I have with him, which we'll get into the negatives, that really makes me mad. Because you hire a legendary actor like Tony Todd, Death himself from Final Destination, to be in this movie, and he feels kind of underutilized here, but which is not a fault on him at all. But I think the voice acting is still very good here. The RC twins in this movie, you have Tom Kenny, the voice of SpongeBob, voicing Willie, Skids, and Mudflap. I think, no, Reno Wilson voices Mudflap. He just voices Willie and Skids. And you have Gray DeLiz as RC. So a lot of Autobots in this movie are very good, and so I will say the voice acting and the human acting is good for the most part. And I will say the score and the soundtrack is once again good. This time you have more songs, Linkin Park, you have New Divide, which is another one of my favorites. You have Stain, you have 21 Guns by Green Day, which that is the main song everyone was playing for a couple of years because of this movie. It's a great song, I can see why. And then the score by Steven Jablonsky once again is very good. He tries some new themes in this, but he does use some themes from the first movie. And there are some really good musical cues in this movie. And Steve Jablonsky just goes full on force when it comes to that. Michael Bay's direction, again, for all the stuff they have to go through in this movie, I still think his direction is at least competent, despite some of the tendencies going a little bit too far. Yeah. I don't mind Raymond Rodriguez as the character of Leo. For the most part, he's fine. Going back to the parents, I do like the scene with Sam and his father after they reunite in Egypt, and Sam has to go off on his own, and the dad doesn't want to because it's his son and they're in the middle of a robot war. And I actually think this is genuinely heartfelt when he tells him, you don't stop, you don't hide, you run. And then this is the moment where his little man is growing up. And now going into the things I do have a problem with. For starters, for a Transformers sequel, this movie is way too long for a sequel to Transformers. I know some people are complaining about Across the Spider-Verse. Here's the difference when it comes to Transformers and Across the Spider-Verse. Well, Across the Spider-Verse is part of a series, and it's the first of a two-part story that's taking a lot of advantage of what is set up in Into the Spider-Verse and applies it to here. So the 140-minute runtime in that movie is easy to digest, and it doesn't feel that long. When it comes to Revenge of the Fallen, however, even though this is 2 hours and 29 minutes, there are a lot of unnecessary things in here, and there is a lot of subplots that kind of goes nowhere. So when people say this is an empty movie, I kind of understand why. There's still a plot here I can figure out, despite everything that happened with the writers, but there are just a lot of unnecessary moments in here. You have, in the beginning, dogs fighting each other.
Wrong, sir. Wrong.
Which is very unnecessary. You have the mom, Judy, eating weed brownies, which this is where it gets too far when it comes to the parents.
Curses!
That was not really necessary. You could have easily taken that out of the movie. Devastator with balls. Are you kidding me, Michael Bay? That wasn't really necessary.
The fuck are you out of your damn mind?
I rewatched this movie just to prep for this review, and that was not necessary. You could have easily taken out this entire movie and it would have done better. Some of the things in the story doesn't make a whole lot of sense, which I can blame that a little bit on the writer's strike of this movie. Because the writer's strike definitely did get in the way of this movie, but I also can blame some of it on Michael Bay and his tendencies coming out. That was another thing. Michael Bay's tendencies with some of the hypersexualization, some of the juvenile humor, and some of the stupidity here becomes very apparent here. Especially what I just mentioned. It's not as bad as Age of Extinction, but it's not really much to offer in terms of that. And you could have easily cut that out of this movie. And you will save at least maybe 10 to 15 minutes. Some of the dialogue in this movie is very stilted and cliched, which, again, I don't fully blame the writers for it. But it's just some of the writing decisions here. And also, especially with Galloway in this movie here, I'm sorry, no disrespect to the actor. I think John Benjamin Hickey does a good job in the role. I just hated this character's guts, and I know that's the point, but he could have easily been taken out of the movie. Luckily, he does get taken out of this movie pretty quick when Josh Duhamel just kicks him off the plane, which that still makes me laugh. The female Decepticon thing is just very weird as all hell. I understand Transformers and Autobots and Decepticons can transform into anything. They can transform into your phone, a microwave, a laptop, even your camera, which I'm talking to you on. But this was not needed. Isabel Lucas is a pretty girl. She does fine as Alex, but you could have easily got someone else like Brie Larson or something for the role. I don't know what they were thinking when they wrote this in, but she's just there to try and seduce Sam and cause more conflict with him and Michaela, besides the fact Michaela wants to break up with him. And then the fact that he can't tell Michaela that he loves her, which is another thing that kind of bugged me when I first saw it, and it still does. Luckily, he does tell her, but I just feel like Alice being a female Decepticon, while it's an interesting idea on paper, execution, whole nother story. You see what I said about execution? You can have a good idea all you want, but if you don't execute it right, you ain't got shit. And that is the main thing when it comes to what's written on paper and what's being executed into a movie.
Michaela.
Is that your girlfriend?
Mm-hmm.
Ex.
Michaela.
Wait. Hold on, listen. I can explain it. Well, Sam, your bed buddy Alice. Explain it. Whoa, 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 whoa! Whoa, whoa!
Optimus does not get a lot to do in this movie, because when they had him on the posters, I was really excited to see what Optimus was going to do. He kicks ass in this movie for the lore he's in, especially towards the end with the jetpack and stuff. That's really cool. And he does talk straight funky to Galloway about them leaving and what if something happens, which again, that's foreshadowing in Dark of the Moon when he says Decepticons will never leave your planet alone. He kind of says something like that here, but my problem with him is when Megatron comes back and kills him off.
Did you forget who I am?
He's taken out of this movie for almost the entire runtime until when Sam is resurrected, and he uses the Matrix of leadership to bring him back. And that is kind of a waste of Peter Cullen. It's like, why would you have this legendary actor who's been voicing Optimus Prime since he was younger and not give him anything to do just to be killed off? Same goes with Tony Todd as the Fallen. Again, great design, great voice acting, but he could have easily had more to do in this movie, and I just feel like they kind of dropped the ball. You have one of the legendary horror icons in Tony Todd. Are you kidding me? The Seaman himself, Daniel Roberto himself. and you don't use him effectively, why would you even put him in this movie to begin with if you ain't gonna do nothing with him?
And you know this, man!
The character is obnoxiously annoying, but he's nowhere near as annoying as who I'm really about to get to. Because, at least with Leo, he has a few moments that made me laugh, like, FBI, CIA, we are wanted fugitives now. And when they go meet John Turturro in this movie, which I will also say he's pretty good in the movie here. I like they gave him more to do. For the most part, Raymond Rodriguez is fine. He does have some funny moments. But there are moments in this movie where he becomes a little bit annoying. The scene that I did like with him the most is when they go to the meat shop with him and he's like, you never heard the real effing deal.com? Which he's trying to say the real fucking deal.com, is just, you can't say it because it's a PG-13 in this. But there's moments where he gets increasingly annoying. But the moment where it really got to my breaking points with him screaming in the car, that moment when John Turturro just shocks him and tases him.
God, please, God, please!
Yo, stop freaking out. Stop freaking out.
Shut this guy up, huh?
Please, just let me live, just let me live, just let me
Just stop screaming, that's it!
I like that moment. But the biggest thing of this entire movie that has been heavily criticized, despite all the problems I just mentioned, who I will not watch this movie ever again for, and who I will never, once again, go back to defending, is Mudflap and Skids.
Red flag!
Now, when I was a kid, I loved Mudflap and Skids. I thought they were pretty funny. I thought they were hilarious. Again, I was a kid, okay? But watching this movie now, these two are pretty much the Jar Jar Binks of this entire movie and this entire franchise. It is easy to see why they have not been in the next one. Because they're annoying, they're obnoxious, they're very loud, ghetto, stereotypical, racist type robots. And not only that, they don't read. I said I wasn't gonna make a tantrum, but this was not needed. You did not need these two. You could easily took them out of this movie. Luckily, Bumblebee there's a scene with Bumblebee where they get into arguing and Bumblebee just kicks them out of the pyramid, which Bumblebee always has some of the funniest moments in these movies, for better or worse, and Bumblebee's a badass. These two really annoyed me. Not as much as Leo and not as much as the parents, which is just the two brothers in this movie, besides all the other individual problems, annoys the hell out of me. The robot heaven stuff, which I understand, this is where we all thought Sam was gonna die, which obviously this is a big cop-out, but you can't kill your main character in the second movie of the series. But I think that would have been a little ambitious if they actually did that. Now, the scene with the 7 legendary primes was well done. I just feel like that could have easily been done better. But all in all, I still enjoy Revenge of the Fallen, despite its huge problems. I'm not saying this movie is perfect. I can never argue with anyone that says this is a disaster. This is a problematic sequel that has a lot of faults and a lot of production troubles behind it due to the writer's strike. And it's a lot of decisions that Michael Bay made that I feel like he should have thought twice about, especially those damn twins. So I find this to be a pretty entertaining sequel that I can watch, but make no mistake, this is a fundamentally flawed film that I would never put in my favorite movies of all time, but I can look at this as a guilty pleasure. If some of you can't look at this as a guilty pleasure, that's completely fine. I know some people who actually put this as the worst movie of all time. But for me, I still get some enjoyment out of it. I just wish that the script was a little bit better. I wish certain decisions Michael Bay did was much better. then you will really have at least a kick-ass second entry. Well, that's gonna do it for the video that you just watched. I will have my channel here, so you would like to see anything here, click the channel icon, subscribe for more. I will also leave a video and maybe a playlist here, so in case you want to see what I'm about. As always, stay Epictasticness, join the Epictasticness, and you guys keep it cool.